Curt, welcome to the campfire, my friend.
Thanks, Mike. I love campfires. That's great.
They're a beautiful thing. It's kind of how we all come together. It's throughout the evolution of the human experience. We get around a fire and just we relax and we actually tell stories and
Oh
they help
yeah,
somebody.
absolutely. Absolutely. I've taught a little bit of wilderness survival here and there, and people kind of laugh at me because I say building the fire may not be what's going to save you because it's a lot easier to stay warm by building a proper shelter, right? You can't feed a fire all night very
Exactly.
easily, but the fire provides so much comfort. It's like a friend when you're feeling alone. And I think its value isn't really for the warmth so much as it is just the peace of mind, that comes with it.
It really is. When I think about it on that level, because like I tell everybody at all my speaking engagements, I rebuilt my sense of self-worth and self-value one swing of a hatchet at a time, putting together
Yes.
firewood and shelters and things like that. And for me, it was a lot of going through life trying to find value that somebody would give me. There was never any
Mm,
real fact in that, and it was always easily taken. But getting out on a trail and actually going through the process, it was something that I look back at and I say, I was able to do that. So why am I looking over here for someone to tell me who I am when I
yes.
now know in a concrete way that nobody can take that away?
There's a kind of a sense of self-confidence or self-reliance. It's such a simple thing in a way to think that building a fire could make you feel that way. But it really does, because if there are listeners out there that have not tried to build fires in difficult conditions, especially, it's not straightforward. It's a skill set. It's something you learn, and once you learn it and you can reliably do it, it builds a sense of confidence. It really does. But it's confidence you can share because once the fire is there, everyone huddles around it.
Actually, that's a great way to wrap up what I've experienced through my work with the project. Is if you take the project itself being the fire that I built through learning and life experiences and started to share that. Now it's
Yes.
become like this magnet that just draws people in. And they come to me a lot of the time with the tagline and the sense of adventure.
Mm.
And underlying underneath all that, we're putting all this philosophy and all these real world tools together, which I think is a really cool concept because when somebody shows up and they're like, this is gonna be great. I don't know why I'm here, but it's fun and amusing, amazing, whatever. And then they
Yes.
walk out and they realize, man, I just learned how to sit still for 60 minutes and connect with myself. And I feel better
Yes.
because of it. So I can take this into my daily world, build a practice around it, and I'm going to start overcoming all these hurdles that I couldn't see any other way to do.
It's very hard, I think, to sit quietly and to do the deep work that needs to be done sometimes. It's hard because it's hard to be that honest with ourselves. We like to distract ourselves so we don't have to go there, you know? I used to take groups of students into the wilderness and we would do like a week long, outdoor experience with these kids. And they were inner city kids. Some of them absolutely could not handle it because their distractions were taken away. And there were others that just fell in love with nature. It just instant bonding with it and it all worked. There were people in the middle that experienced it maybe for the first time and they found a friend there in nature or in the quiet or in the introspection, even. But I had kids that couldn't go a week without the stereos and the televisions and the cell phones and the noise, the distractions. They would have to go home. Couldn't do it. So it's pretty interesting.
I think that's the unfortunate part of the programming that we're all subjected to from birth,
Right.
almost, is here's this shiny new distraction. It's going to get you away from the uncomfortable feelings and get you out of my hair for a while. So run off and play with that. And I
Right.
think about my old relationship with my outdoor activities. It was let me go out, get it done, and get back so I can get to those distractions. Because
Mm,
I hated that feeling of what thoughts are going to come up while I'm sitting out there and how can I avoid it? And then lo and behold, finding out that, a lot of what I was doing actually was meditation in a form. So
right.
traveling that trail and really enjoying that journey, it changed that perspective. It brought from I love the results to now I love the journey. It's about each footstep that I take and what will it bring out? What am I going to discover or have to think about or, you know, process while I'm out there?
It's fascinating when you think about it. I've always made spending time in nature a super high priority, and it's probably because of my upbringing. Mike, I grew up in I'm going to call it an emotionally violent home. Rarely was it physical, but it was certainly emotionally violent. And I would escape to the woods, as a kid. We grew up on a farm, or even before, because we lived in town for a while. I had this like 500-acre wood across the house, across the street from the house, and so I was always in the creek bottoms or out in the fields or maybe on some pond bank somewhere. And I remember as a young kid feeling very, very lonely, but also comforted. It called to me, and the sunshine, the fresh air, the animals you might see along the way, the bird songs, just the experiences that you have you wouldn't expect. The surprises. It was very entertaining for me. Um, but learning to do that deep work that you're talking about, where you're actually meditating, that didn't come for until many years later. And there's a skill set there. I'm not sure that I could claim any expertise at all in it myself, but it sounds like you probably could.
I think a lot of it actually, because, there was formal training and stuff that I got intrigued and went through, but for me, really, most of it was just the life experiences, getting out there, seeing the impact that it had on me. Like, for example, one great story I'd love to share was how I overcame my battle with really debilitating anxiety and social
Yeah.
anxiety in particular. And, around the deer rut a few years back, I was standing there. I hadn't seen anything all day. And finally, this young buck come through that I'd never saw before. I like to have that story and that connection. So I didn't draw on him the first time because I'd never seen him before. And I'm standing there thinking about it. I'm like, what am I doing? It's cold. It's miserable. I can get this done, get this over with, go into that old mindset. And then I thought about that anxiety that was on my heart for a couple of weeks leading up to that date. And I projected that story onto him. And I'm thinking to myself, here it is, the rut, the busiest day of his life each year.
Yes.
He's on the menu for everything out there, but he's not letting it stop him. Why is that? And it's because in the back of his mind, even though it's a life and death situation for him, he knows he's got the skills and the ability to at least put up a fight and get out of there. And
Mm,
then it clicked, and I'm like, well, my anxiety, my panic attacks, they feel life and death in the moment, but they're really not.
yeah.
And if I take that moment and I just breathe and I think about, the deer out there doing his work, not letting those fears get a hold of him and prevent that, I can do the same thing. I got the tools, I've got the skills. Life has brought me here for a reason. So therefore I can go forward and work my way through it. And it was just little phenomenons like that that really took it to the next level. Each footstep became more powerful and got me into getting some formal training and things like that, which then led me to doing the podcast and beginning to work with people.
Well, it's great that you're sharing what you've learned because there's so much healing in nature, and there's also healing in the meditative work. And people need that. I think they need it now more than maybe at any time in human history. Social media pulls us away from our sources. And we're in the cities more than ever. And children just, they don't play outside like they used to. We're missing that element of what it means to be human and human on Earth. One of the things that's really important to me, Mike, is that we realize that we're a part of nature. Uh, some people think that humans are like a virus on nature, or that somehow nature has to be protected from us. And I think the reality is that we are a part of nature and we need to learn how to nurture it and care for it.
Do absolutely.
But we never learn that if we don't go to nature. And there are so many people that would benefit so much just by, I mean, even if it's the local park, step outside and take a moment to observe, to soak it in. It's life changing, life impacting. The other day, I got to tell you this story because it was so special to me. We live near the Gunnison River in Colorado, and I walked over to the river and I sat down on a rock on the bank. And at least in our neck of the woods, the great blue herons are extraordinarily shy. They're truly wild here. And one of them came soaring around the river bend and landed in some, oh, maybe 2 feet of water, you know. And I thought, I'm just going to try to be a stump because I knew that if I twitched just a little, it would fly away. And so I sat there watching the heron, and it was watching me. Our eyes are locked. He's maybe 25 yards away, but I wouldn't even blink or breathe. And it took, boy, close to 10 minutes, it felt like, before he decided that I really might not be a threat. And then the most amazing thing happened. He took 2 steps forward and reached into the river and pulled out a 10-inch trout with no effort. And then he walked up onto the bank into some low willows and he threw the trout down on the ground. And I thought, what is he doing? And he just stood there and watched it until it quit flopping. And then I realized, well, he doesn't want to eat it when it's all wiggling around. He'd prefer to wait until it settles down before he swallows. I'd never seen that behavior before. Then he picked it up, went back to the river, washed the dirt off of it, and then swallowed it. And I had to be so intentional about not moving and so intentional about participating in this event, this life giving event for this heron, right? But life giving for me too. And finally, when that was all done, my butt had gone numb. I needed to move. I just hurt. And so I finally said, well, I'm going to see if I can slowly just kind of drift away. But as soon as I moved just the tiniest bit, he leapt into the air and soared off. you know? So it was a magic moment, and it's one I'll remember for the rest of my life. And I don't know if I had any huge life lessons there, except maybe we have to be still, we have to be quiet, and we have to observe to see the magic.
That's absolutely beautiful. Actually, I'd go a little bit deeper than that with spirit animal concept of it and the fact that there is a story and there's something to be learned, and that's focusing in on the rituals of your day. Because,
Mm,
as you two sat there and then he pulled the trout out, he went through the ritual of watching it die, and then he took it back to clean it before he ate it. And
yeah.
a lot of the times in our lives we get so caught up in the fast pace of things that we ignore those simple little rituals that we go through every day. And if you were to bring yourself and be more present and mindful within whatever it is you do, from as simple as when you get out of bed, you go to the bathroom and then you get up, make some coffee, go back, brush your teeth, watch the news while you drink your coffee, whatever it may be. Those little things that give us opportunities to really practice discipline.
Oh yeah. Mike, my children are all grown now. They're in their 20s. And as they're going through college, I have two in college still, but as they're going through college, I got a chance to meet a lot of people their age. And it kind of, I guess, was reminiscent of when I used to work with middle school kids and take them into the woods. But I kept meeting their acquaintances and realizing, wow, they don't have, most of them don't have the focus to go through the ritual that you're talking about, just to be present and intentional. And I saw a real need there for, I mean, there are ways to address it, and getting out into the woods. That's one of them for sure. But some people just need to look in the mirror and see themselves as they really are for the first time. And when I realized how these kids were so bewildered, these young adults were so bewildered by life, they're missing some of those foundational, axioms that we all need to lean into. That's why I wrote my book. And, I wrote the book in hopes that I could find people that might benefit a little bit, have some encouragement from it. And what it does is it tries to help people to sort out areas of their lives that if they could just address that thing, their life could be so much better, right? And I don't even think of it as a self-help book. I think of it as a learn how to think book. And I hope that people out there may benefit from it. And it doesn't tell people what to believe, rather, it says how to start sorting out what your beliefs are. And I think that's part of what this process is. That's what meditation is about. It's about honesty, observation, intention. And until we can be fully honest with ourselves, then we're always fighting that battle, right? The battle of distractions instead of engaging in life.
We
So,
are, and you left out the key word love.
yep.
You gotta love what you're doing. And I think that's really when you step into the outdoor arena, that's what you're really learning, at least at the very beginning, is the love for
Yes.
the natural flow of life.
Well, and without love, none of the rest of it matters. But when I say love, I'm not talking about just romantic love or love you have for your family or love you have for your friends. There are many different kinds of love, and our English language is funny in that we don't have the words for these types of love, right? We might say something like, "Oh, honey, I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you." And we might also say, "Oh, I love Snickers bars." It's like, what? How could those be the same word?
It's an
That's
interesting concept.
yeah. So in some languages they have many more words for love. And like Greek has about 7 words. You can count some and not count some, but there's things like eros, which is erotic love. There's agape, which is divine love. That's the love of pure forgiveness, acceptance in a way that humans struggle to do. Um, anyway, those are just some examples. There's filio, which is brotherly love. Philadelphia, right, was named the city of brotherly love, and that means the love that you have for a friend and for a community. And it's nice when you can come up with the words that really describe what's going on, because I think then it makes it easier to understand when someone says love, what that means. It's not just a feeling. Matter of fact, I would say it's not a feeling. The feeling that we get is a result of love. It's not what love is.
I've encountered a lot of experiences where the language barrier, I feel like internally sometimes that dialogue gets
Yeah,
challenging. It's very hard to understand what it is, the feelings that you're having. So then that inner conflict comes up. Because to me, as I've progressed and begun to understand, it really spins a lot around that self-dialogue that we use and
right,
becoming aware of it. You know, like I mentioned about having that language barrier with yourself. A lot of the time, the feelings are there. We can't really put the words to describe it. So then we come up and we counter that with, man, you're so stupid because you couldn't figure out how to describe this thing. And that's a real challenge for all of us is that self-talk, working on changing the vocabulary that we use.
right. I was probably about 22 years old when I found a book called Telling Yourself the Truth. And it's a simple concept. It didn't need to be a book. A paragraph would do. But the bottom line was Most of what we struggle through is because we are not telling ourselves the truth. We're setting the wrong frame for our life experience. People might say something like, man, I'm stupid and people hate me. None of that is true. That's never true, right? Um, the truth might be, or maybe some would say, if I try to do this new thing, then I'm going to screw up and I'll be embarrassed. Those sorts of statements are self-defeating, right? It's so much better to say, trying new things is how we learn. And I really enjoy learning because it makes my life better. And people aren't going to be critical of me anyway, most likely. They're too busy worrying about themselves. So I should do the thing and see what happens and what I learn. And I'm not stupid if I mess up. It's just a process of learning, So if you reframe your language, then it opens all sorts of doors.
That's actually what got the wilderness meditation aspect of this going. Like I mentioned, I argued and found out I was wrong about meditation and that it was helpful and positive. But I still had that idea caught up in my head that if I did this at home, my roommate at the time would look at me like I'm stupid. As we mentioned, I'd get so much flack for it. So I'm like, man, I'm not safe in my own head doing it here. Where's the safest place that I can do it? And
Yes.
that's out in nature. So then I started applying it on the trails and, even just going out sometimes to sit at a park or whatever. And the more that I did that, the more it became comfortable. Now I have no problem sitting down. I could probably sit down in a grocery store and sit there for about 60 minutes and just meditate and, the looks and whatever and not even be a big deal because I took that time. I put that work in and I went to
Right.
where I was safe, where I was comfortable. And I think that that's one of the most important parts when it comes to changing that dialogue going in your head is do it in a
Mm.
place where you can practice that it's comfortable. If it's a journal, if it's looking in a mirror, if it's going out and sitting on the top of a mountain where nobody's going to pass, it doesn't make a difference. Even if it's in your car, for God's sakes.
Yeah. Well, and here's something beautiful about the story that you've related to me is that it started as something you needed and you did, but now it involves others. And now you don't mind meditating in front of others because it's become a testimony, right, to the healing that you've received, and it's a gift that you can give. I think that that's what happens when we get ourselves right, is that then we have something to offer. And when you're doing something that benefits other people, it also helps to take away the self-consciousness, the embarrassment of, oh no, or what are they going to think of me? When you're thinking, no, they could really benefit from this. I'll take this risk because it's worth it, you know?
Most definitely. In fact, actually, my last class that I conducted, I had that exact experience where, it was a wider demographic, so I had some younger kids there. And as I'm walking around getting the flow of things in the back of my head, they're probably thinking I'm crazy, I'm stupid, whoa, the whole woohoo thing and all the stigmas that go around meditation.
Yeah.
But it's like, you know what? I don't care. I'm here to do this. This is what it is. All those other stories are irrelevant. By the end of the 60 minutes, I had them hooked. So
Sure.
it was really cool to see the change.
Mm, that's great. Well, and I love your idea of nature as being a place for it. Um, Another benefit. If you go through every day the same way, you don't remember one day from another. 2 weeks from now, you're like, what day was that? What did I do? They all blend together. But if you go somewhere special and you take time to observe, you make memories that you have for the rest of your life. And that makes life richer. And I like to collect memories like some people might collect things. I'm not big into things, but I am big into memories. I mean, life is not about owning. Life's about being and doing. And it's just so much more meaningful to me when I take the time to act. I mean, there was one day that I had. 30 minutes to kill. And I sat down in the woods and I looked at an old rotted stump. And it was just a stump, right? But I started really observing it and I started meditating on it, the grain, the twist of the grain, the shape of the wood. And then I started thinking about, I mean, this stump was probably about 100 years of growth before the tree had died. The 100 years of its life that it had lived, all the weather, the seasons, the experiences. If it had memory, what would it be able to tell me? And by looking at that stump in that way, and another thing I like to do is to look at something and then close my eyes and visualize it, and then open my eyes and look again, and then close my eyes again and visualize it, because it becomes a photograph in your mind that you can take with you for the rest of your days. So all I did was look at a stump, but Mike, I'm telling you, that was nearly 20 years ago. And I remember that stump like a friend. And it told me things, right? I learned from it. And that's what this can do for people. It's fascinating. It was just a stump, but it's not just a stump to me now.
No, actually, I can relate a lot to that because for a good chunk of time, I was traveling through the Ohio Valley, making a point to visit every one of the Hopewell earthworks that I could find. And
Yeah,
and that all started, in fact, we just recently went down to the very first one that we visited down in Indiana at Mountain State Park. And the first time we went there, I sat down and meditated on the actual mound,
yeah.
and I could feel all the history and all the things that had happened there. And that was a really interesting thing to me because I've always been very skeptical about, supernatural and all those different things like that. But it was that moment that I realized that there was a real connection. There was a real love shared between me and that specific spot to be able to tell me that story. And tapping into that, I was allowing myself to actually express that love and receive it back, get that support system going. And
So
that
how did these life experiences improve your life?
they've definitely taken me from allowing depression and all those negative things being my voice to gaining
Mm,
control over it, learning how to let things go. Like the concept of throwing stuff in a backpack. We go through life, we collect all that garbage along the way, and we don't think about the impact or we don't think about
yeah.
how much it is, how much it's slowing us down. But there was another specific memory I was meditating on one of their burial mounds, and I specifically felt somebody sitting across from me and pulling that
Mm.
stuff out, beckoning me to acknowledge it and let it go. And the more that I've lightened my load along the way, the more it's allowed me to grow and shape me into who I've become. You mentioned something earlier about how life isn't about ownership, about actually owning all these different things. The only thing we actually own is the moment that we're standing
Mm.
in. And when you think about it from that aspect, like, this conversation kind of got delayed because when we were supposed to do it, I was laying in a hospital almost dying.
Yeah,
And
rough, man.
it puts you in a position where you change the idea from I'm going to own the future to I'm just grateful for the fact that I get to have that next hour, that next day, next week, and so on. And when you have that kind of mindset, it takes all that other stuff. It makes it easier to just set it down along the trail.
You know, I a lot of the people watching or listening out there, they might think, "What?" What I'm getting ready to share. But I recently read a book on near-death experiences where people clinically died and came back. And a sizable percentage of people that experience a clinical death like that go to an experience on the other side, and you can attribute it to all sorts of different things, whatever you want to do. I only want to share this part. They're forever changed when they come back. And what happens is life is not about the things anymore. It's about the experience of the moment. and they quit worrying about the future so much because they've had a taste of a future that is very reassuring. And so many of these people that have had these experiences come back, and it's all about how can I share love with other people, and how can I be in the moment and have this life experience. Um, that's not woo-woo stuff. That's actually what life is about. And I, for one, believe them.
I've had a couple of experiences where I can no longer discredit those sort of concepts or ideas because when you live through things, it takes away the skepticism, right?
Sure.
And granted, I wasn't in that position where I crossed over, came back. I was just really physically ill. And I remember the night before I got released from the hospital, this was after spending a couple of days in ICU and kind of overhearing all the craziness that goes on in there. This new doctor that I didn't see before comes in and with the seriousness of diabetes, he starts,
Mm,
not he doesn't really introduce himself. He just starts going and harping on those sort of things. And after this 20-minute spiel, I'm looking at him going, man, you know, 3 days ago I was laying almost losing my life. I think I understand the reality of the situation.
yes.
You really didn't have to go waste all that breath. You could have just simply came in, introduced yourself, been like, okay, this is where you were, this is where you are, and this is how we're going to go forward. And it's really important that you take it serious. And
Yes.
it doesn't take a situation like that to really connect with where you are in life and where you're trying to go, to really understand the importance of just placing one footstep in front of the other,
Yes.
building that connection and that love with the world around you. It can come just from a simple 2 minutes sitting on a tree stump.
Mm. Yeah, that's really, really good. In my book, I make the point that life slaps us upside the head sometimes to get our attention, and we learn life's lessons the hard way. But we can also learn life's lessons by observing the world around us and learning from other people's mistakes and taking time to just be present. And we can begin to improve our lives and understand so much more when we do it intentionally instead of waiting for life to force it on us. And sometimes challenging things happen that it is nothing to do with us. But a lot of the time, when we're going through life without paying attention, I say it's like driving 80 miles an hour through the fog, right? We do end up crashing because life's trying to tell us, no, that's not how you live. That's not it, you know? But we can avoid a lot of those hardships just by attending to a little bit of wisdom. And that's why I encourage people. It's worth sorting out your belief system and living a life that's in alignment with that. And it's all based on honesty and love and forgiveness, right? That's what gets us there. But we can avoid those crashes. But life will still throw hard times at us. We're all mortal. It's going to happen. But we'll be better equipped to manage those experiences, I think, if we've done some of this work.
It's that word equipped that I don't think enough of us really truly give ourselves the credit for,
Mm,
because we get to the obstacle, in this case, my with diabetes. I
yeah.
wake up every day now and I've got to stab myself 4 or 5 times a day. So I I get out of bed and I'm like, man, I really don't want to do this today. But I know the alternative, so I have to. And I
Yeah.
think in that moment in this situation, life led me down a trail that equipped me to be ready for it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of speculation, or well, not speculation, but like the stories that we tell kids in order to get them to behave, right? Kind of
Mm,
ideas around diabetes, like if you eat too much of this, too much of that, you're going to have diabetes one day. Well, in all reality, it's just something that naturally happens. If it's in your genetics to happen, it's going to happen. So are you
yep.
going to deal with it, or are you just going to let it run its course and degrade your quality of life? And I think regardless of what it is that we're dealing with, it's that same sort of situation. We come up to an obstacle or an impediment and we look at it like we make it a mountain inside
Mm,
of our own minds. I really fell into that habit as I started getting into the routine. I got to do this again. I got to do that again. This is horrible. But
mm.
the more that you do it, the more that you practice, the more it just becomes, oh, there's the trail. Maybe I got to pull some rope out of my backpack in order to scale this mountain. Heck, maybe I've even got to look around and build the rope myself. Whatever it is, it's already there. If you just
Yeah.
stop, go back to that stillness, give yourself that credit for every footstep that's led you to where you're at.
Yeah, that's powerful. And to realize that you'll get through.
Absolutely. And you still got to hold a sense of love for yourself and love for the world around you, as well as the people that
Yes,
inspire you. I think that's an important
absolutely.
factor to really carry with you.
I've had a few experiences where I went too far, too late at night at the wrong season, and I had to hike out in the bitter cold, in the snow, in the dark. And in those situations, if you stop, well, I don't want to give bad advice. So let me just say, if you know where you're going and you stop, it may cost you your life. But if you're able to just persevere and keep going, then you'll be okay. I went backpacking with my sons several years ago, and my youngest was just a little guy. He had almost a pretend backpack, with a toothbrush and a pillow or something. But we got stuck in an area where we had to hike out in the dark. Um, it had cliffed out on us, and it was really, really tough going. And I remember about 11 o'clock at night, cold wind blowing, and we've been climbing this mountain up around 12,000 feet in the dark. And he looks at me, he says, "Dad, when can we quit?" And I said, "When we're safe." Not until. And this is what life is like sometimes. You quit when you're safe and you keep going during the hard times. And that was another beautiful experience. The outcome of that one was we found a little knoll behind a rock outcropping where the ground is level enough. And I put the boys down in their sleeping bags and I literally staked a tarp over them because the wind was blowing so high. There was no way to put up a tent or anything like that. But the wind could blow over the tarp instead of blowing them. The stars, the Milky Way galaxy, that night at 12,000 feet in the cold, unbelievable life experience. That was transformative. And the next morning, what woke us up was a mountain goat sniffing our hair. And it was just such a beautiful experience for this mountain goat to come to us and to be curious and to say, "Oh, what are you guys?" And you open your eyes and he's right there, and it's gift. It's a gift. It's a gift. Um, but the reason I told that story is because so much of life is about, oh crap, I didn't mean to be here. This is not what I expected. Now I have to learn a new way and I have to keep going until I'm safe. And that's what you're learning from your diabetes.
Exactly. It's almost like when you're on a trail and you end up turned around. I didn't mean to get there, but I got to keep going.
Yeah.
And I
Yep.
think it's a beautiful place to set this conversation down, actually, to not only leave that thought-provoking idea, but a beautiful picture of the reward of getting to somewhere safe. So before I let you
Right.
go, you got to let people know how they can get in touch with you, get your book, all that good stuff.
Well, um, my book's on Amazon and it's 99 words, Building a Better Life. Um, it has a lot of tools and I consider it a toolkit. It has a lot of tools in here for accomplishing the things that you and I are talking about how to move forward through life and make life more meaningful, more enjoyable, better, more rewarding, and that to have a life where you can actually encourage others. And I love your story because that's what you've done in your own life. It's a beautiful thing. So you can find this on Amazon if you think it might be useful or if you know someone who might benefit with a toolkit of encouragement, is what I hope it is. Um, But I can be found at curtlinville.com. That's Linville. So you can reach me through that, and I will reply and connect with people. So if you'd like to connect, find me at curtlinville.com. And I just appreciate your time, Mike. This has been a really good conversation.
It has. I've really enjoyed this one. Thank you very much, Curt.
No, you bet.